for Susan Smith happening in South Carolina, and that's where we find our Court TV anchor Julie Grant hosting her coverage from there live. Julie, what's happening now?
And Julia, good morning to you. We're waiting for history to unfold right now. We expect that after this 5-minute break, the parole board will reconvene and Susan Smith should be called. We've been keeping track of the inmates that we knew were going to be called before her. There was one addition we were unaware of in advance, but it seems that Susan Smith should be next. By our counting, we expect her to be the next case called. So this is history that we're going to be watching together, and we're going to see the votes from the parole board members in real time. I was in the room yesterday. Looking at the room, you can see that the parole board members are seated in a U shape. And then in front of them are two screens. There's going to be a screen where Susan Smith will be appearing, and she's going to make her plea for release after 30 years. And then right next to it, there's a screen with all of the names of the parole board members, and their votes will be put up there on the board. What Susan Smith needs to get in order to be released is a 2/3 majority. What we have is originally a 7-member board. That's the way it is structured in South Carolina. But since March of 2022, there's been one vacancy. So there are going to be 6 board members that she's going to be going before. So that would be she needs 4 out of the 6 to vote to approve her parole. At the time that she went to trial, the law said that the jury wasn't allowed to know that life in prison didn't actually mean life. It meant life with a chance of parole. And this is something that has long troubled the prosecutor that put her away, someone we know very well, attorney Tommy Pope. He was a young solicitor at the time, sensational trial attorney, and he went for the death penalty. The case has just been called. Let's go live into the room where you're going to see Tommy Smith and David Smith deliver impassioned pleas against her release.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have received this correspondence. It is addressed to the Honorable Chair Kimberly Frederick, dated November 20th, 2024. Please be advised that I will recuse myself in the parole hearing of Susan Smith, number 221487. I was acting warden at Camille Brand Correctional Center in 1999, where inmate Smith was housed, and subsequently transferred to Leith Correctional Institution. I have determined that it is appropriate to recuse to eliminate any appearance of affecting her opportunity for parole. Respectfully, Geraldine P. Miro. Thank you, Mrs. Miro. This is accepted. If you would please exit the room. Thank you. Mrs. Miro has recused herself of this case and has exited the room. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have moved her site into the lobby briefly. And one moment as we admit all parties. There at Leith, ma'am, confirming you are Miss Susan Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And Attorney Tommy Thomas, are you able to hear us?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Thank you. And there at the support site, confirming you are here in support of Miss Susan Smith?
They're asking, can you hear? Yes, we can hear.
And you're here in support of Miss Smith?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Thank you all for joining you before the board. Please await for the chairman to address you.
Good morning, Ms. Smith. Good morning, Mr. Thomas, and good morning to the folks at Watkins. Thank you all for being here with us today. We hope everyone is doing well. Ms. Smith, I want you to know that we have received the packet of information that Mr. Thomas's office provided to us on your behalf, and we have reviewed that packet. So thank you for submitting that in advance of this hearing today. Mr. Thomas, are you going to begin, or is your client going to begin?
Yes, ma'am. I'll be glad to begin.
Yes, sir.
Members of the board, good morning. This is Susan Smith's parole hearing. This has probably been one of the most difficult cases that I have had to put together for a parole presentation. Just lots of different factors to consider. She's been convicted of murder, of course. She has served 30 years, and she was 23 at the time that this incident occurred. She was sentenced to life with the eligibility of parole, so that's why she is here today. I'm not really going to speak much about the crime. There are some things that I want to cover, and that's not out of disrespect. We were very concerned about that. Today is Susan's parole hearing, and so today is going to be about Susan, and I want to make sure that the things that are important not only to her but to this hearing and this board are presented. And I want to thank you in advance for your time to listen to everything. This story is really a mental health story. Some of this stuff, I've known Susan for a couple of years, and we've been working on this case. One of the things when I first met her was, of course, trying to kind of figure out some rhyme or reason as to, how these things have happened, and was able to find and have someone come to see her on a routine basis for counseling, and also to try to help her, through the daily things with Department of Corrections. As a result, that's kind of what I came to the conclusion was it is a mental health story. It's about the dangers of untreated mental health. It is about the lack of insight, the lack of diagnosis into mental health, and it's about stigmas, old stigmas. Of course, I'm 68 years old. I remember those. Hopefully they're not as bad today. Susan was hospitalized as a young teen for a short period of time for mental health treatment. And not to disparage anybody, but her mom was telling folks that she was in the hospital because she had a strep infection. So those were things that we didn't talk about. Those were things that were pushed under the rug, so to speak, because they were embarrassing. They showed weakness. I don't know what they showed, but they showed up and culminated in Susan as a result of a day that all of this came together and produced some horrendous results. So I think it's important to Susan, if anything comes out of this hearing, it's that people understand there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing and no reason not to reach out and seek treatment. And there is certainly no stigma that should be involved in trying to better yourself and help yourself. For yourself and for others, members of the family and everyone. Susan, moving on, Susan is a high school graduate. She has some college with USC Union. She has attended International Christian College, and she's worked on an associate's degree. She's still actually working on that in Christian counseling. She has no prior record that I'm aware of. If paroled, she would be living with her brother, Scotty Vaughn. Scotty is here today and very briefly wanted to address the board. The job for her, she has served 30 years, so she's been in Department of Corrections for a long time, would be through vocational rehab. The PEP program is probation and parole, would know it. And we have made arrangements for aftercare with a licensed mental health professional. You have that information in the packet that's been provided to you. Some of the programs, I took the time to look at everything, to look at the programs that she's been involved in, and I'm not going to speak about all of those because you have those in the packet. The ones that I think are important and relevant today is the self-harmers group. She has attempted to commit suicide on several different occasions within the Department of Corrections. 7 Habits, Beyond Abuse, Jumpstart, which she is a great fan of. She does not have a drug or alcohol addiction, thank goodness. She has been active on Endovo and the Cipher Works programs, Loss and Grief, healing seminars, women's empowerment, anger management, self-esteem, and domestic violence workshops. I normally, and I've presented a number of parole hearings, I first started with this thinking that it had to be different than normally what I would do as far as a presentation. And I came to the conclusion maybe this week, and it doesn't. I think it is, and I will stick with what I would normally do as far as the structure of my presentation. What I always begin with the board is contributing factors, because I believe that's important. We need to know what was going on, why it was going on, for the board to be able to make a informed decision about her parole expectations and her parole eligibility, and what kind of candidate she is for parole. One of the things that has jumped out at me, and I saw this last night in the media, and I know that Susan wants to speak, and because she feels like it's important to get the truth out there, is this is not about the love for another man. I saw it on local TV about how this was all about another man and him not wanting children. From what I have been able to determine, that is just not true. I have spoken with David Bruck, who was a defense attorney on a number of different occasions. David has been a great source of information in regards to Susan. He indicated to me that this was a theory of a motive by the state. That's where we think it developed. However, this was never proven at trial, and it was actually abandoned by the state. So, but it has stuck. And I just wanted to, I know it's important to her to bring this to your attention. The contributing factors in this case were multiple stress points. They converged all at the same time. And we're certainly not trying to say anything about, the horrificness of this crime. It is, and she was found guilty, but we're trying to kind of maybe present to the parole board.
Susan's supporter telling the board this case is about untreated mental health and the dangers involved. He's also saying today is all about Susan. But what about justice for Michael and Alex? We'll be right back. We continue our breaking news coverage live from Columbia, South Carolina. Susan Smith going before the parole board after 30 years behind bars. First up is her supporter, Tommy Thomas, speaking to the board right now. You haven't missed a moment. Let's go back in and listen to more of what he's sharing.
One of the things that has been important in her life, and I think is a huge contributor to this crime, is the suicide of her dad at age 6. Horrific, just horrific. And she blamed herself. How could he leave me? And I think it sets the stage for the beginning of some serious mental health issues, some serious depression, which just kind of culminates and continues to snowball. And the lack of, recognition and treatment for this issue with her dad. I mean, it was like the old stigma of, we just tough through these terrible situations, and, that's how it's done. It's not done that way. There were some attempts to get some sort of psychological help for her after a couple of suicide attempts, and never went anywhere. She was the child. The adults in the picture did not can't blame them. I think it was the times. Did not seek and try to understand the depth and the significance of this and what it was going to produce at a later date. Severe depression. Potentially depression after the birth of her last child, which was also undiagnosed, and that postpartum depression that existed in a severe situation. Just in culmination, and I apologize for reading something to the board, but I've looked at so much material, and if I can beg the board's attention for a few minutes, I would like to say this and read this because I think it summarizes everything that I've been talking about and everything that Susan wanted to talk about what happened. She said to me, and this was not in preparation for parole, I found this buried in a bunch of documents that had been provided to me, and it is from Susan. And she says, I believe this is what happened to me on October 25th, 1994. I lost touch with reality. My thoughts were not rational nor logic. I don't think I understood that if I allowed this car to go into the lake, that I would never see my children again. The finality of it was not real to me because my thoughts were so screwed up at the time. My mind, I thought, was doing what was best for them. I knew Jesus would take better care of them than I could. It was truly a moment of insanity. There are no easy explanations and not much understanding. How can you make sense of something that is senseless? And I think that shows the remorse that she's had. She's lived with this for forever since this thing. When I first met her and I would go and see her, remorse is difficult. You know, that's something with the parole hearings that I've presented for years is to how do you say, how do you demonstrate remorse? People do it in different manners. And I always look for that. I always ask my clients, you know, and look for the remorse. I could see the pain on her face. It was so difficult. Talking about things were extremely difficult. And not because she didn't want to talk about them, it's just because it was so hard to talk about them. So I think that she is truly remorseful for what happened. And I think she would do anything in the world to bring these children back. But moving on to the next consideration in this presentation is really changes. What changes has she made in herself in prison? One of the things I think is important is that she has no prior history. Nothing that would lead up to believe that someone would be capable of a crime of this nature, which I think is also indicative of what their risk is if the board was inclined to allow her to participate on parole. I don't think that was as a risk, and I think that's what our counselor, who had seen her on a regular basis for a number of years, also indicated that it was very low risk. She's been IRC chairman within the institution. That means something. You're voted on by your peers, and it is an honor to be in that position. She has been a math tutor in education. She's helped numerous inmates obtain their GED. She's been in the character arts program, prison fellowship, which I think is extremely important to her. She's much stronger in her faith than she has ever been. And that is a comfort for her. It's something that she enjoys. It's something that is extremely important. Jumpstart, good program. She's been in that program. She would actually like to go to Jumpstart if the board would consider her for parole. He has been out of the program for a couple of years, and that would be, she'd have to do some other things for that to happen. So that's why we have chosen that she would go and live with her brother. Good, solid individual in the community, willing to help her in any manner. And one thing I've noticed from the family and friends is that we mourn with her the pain of this crime, but we still love her and we're there for her. So she has that for her, and which is a great resource if the board was going to consider her for parole. One of the other things I've noticed is giving back to the community, arts and crafts. She's made arts and crafts that she's donated to charity. She's helped St. Jude's. She's helped staff members. She said that an insight into what's going on with her, stand on her own 2 feet, not to be influenced by others, live a better life, think before acting. And, you know, other people are affected by your decisions and your actions, and the importance of mental health. I think that comes back into what we're talking about. It's not an excuse, but it is certainly some indication or maybe explanation as to what was going on. The goals, and this is my final area for my presentation, is that I don't think she'll ever be able to forgive herself. That is something that she struggles with forever. I don't think that creates a danger to anyone, except potentially maybe a danger to her. Her medications, her mental health medications, have been balanced well by the Department of Corrections. I think she thinks as clear now as she ever has. I think that she is able to establish goals and what she would like to do in her life. And I think on the top of that list is to give back and to try to help others. She said that no one should suffer in the way that in their treatment. There is help available, and she wants to help to get out and maybe help to promote that that concept that there's help out there. You just have to seek it. And she said she'd like to live a quiet life. She would welcome supervision if granted parole, and maybe that is the best thing about this situation. From that type of situation is that if she's granted parole, it is for life, and she will be supervised and she will be monitored by the Department of Probation and Parole Services for the rest of her life. She said that she would welcome that, because that is another pillar of stability that is available for her that she can reach out to. And she said that that would be a vital and instrumental part of her life. She loves animals. She said that would like to find a job helping with dogs and cats. I often ask my clients, if you could choose and you could make these wishes come true, what would you like to do? You know, what is the job that you truly would enjoy? Often that's different than the job that we have. And I think that job for Susan is the care for animals and being involved in that area of help. In closing, I think that she has indicated to me that her desire is to make her life mean something, something other than the things that she has done, to make a positive impact in her life. I talked to somebody, I've spoken to a number of people, and I've spoken to one person that told me, they were at the trial, and they said that their impression of Susan was that she was living to die. I didn't really understand that. I think the more that I have been talking to her and preparing this case, that maybe I do. I think that has been Susan's life, is living to die for the things that she has done. And I think that what she's asking today is to ask the board to consider a parole for her, so maybe she can make something positive out of a horrific situation. I want to thank you for your time. I know I've taken a lot of time today. I would just ask if you would please consider her for release.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, and we appreciate all
Yes,
your
ma'am.
comments.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for...
And that concludes the advocacy before the parole board from Susan Smith's attorney, Mr. Tommy Thomas, saying that Susan Smith wants to make something of her life and that one of her life goals is to try to help other people if she's given the chance to get out from behind bars. When we come back after this break, we're going to hear from Susan Smith herself as she's going to make her direct plea to the parole board in South Carolina for her release. Thank you for watching Court TV Live. We'll be right back.
The case of Susan Smith.
The convicted killer became infamous after drowning her two young sons and then trying to mislead the public into thinking that they had been kidnapped. Now here we are. This woman is up for parole.
It's all about justice for Michael and Alex.
I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you stay behind bars.
The Susan Smith parole hearing. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Thanks for staying with us as we continue bringing you breaking news coverage of Susan Smith's parole hearing. We are live in Columbia, South Carolina. Our cameras filming this for the world to see. If you're just now joining us, we thank you for that. We just heard from her attorney, Tommy Thomas. Now it's time to hear directly from Susan Smith. Here we go.
Thomas, and we appreciate all
Yes,
your
ma'am.
comments.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for the very detailed packet that you presented. Ms. Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
what would you like to tell us today?
First of all, I want to say how very sorry I am.
It's okay, Susan. Just talk with us.
I know that what I did was horrible. And I would give anything if I could go back and change it. And I love Michael and Alice with all my heart.
Ms. Smith, were you under the influence of drugs or alcohol the night that you murdered your children?
No, ma'am, I was not.
Your attorney talked about working with mental health. Is that helpful to you?
Ma'am,
Mr. Thomas,
I hear you.
Mr. Thomas talked about the fact that you were working with mental health, and my question is that helpful to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that something that you would be willing to continue with on the outside if you were granted parole?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Smith, your crime took a lot of resources from the law enforcement community. What, if anything, would you say to the folks who worked so hard to find your children if you had the opportunity to speak to them today?
That I'm sorry that I put them through that. I really, really am. And I'm especially sorry to the drivers that I had to find them. I wish I could take that back. I really do. I didn't lie to get away with it. I really didn't. I was just scared. I didn't know how I could tell the people that loved them that they would never see them again. I didn't know how I could tell David he couldn't see his sons again. And I'm sorry. I don't know. I know that's not enough. I know it's not, but I don't know. I know that's just sound like words, but they come from my heart. They really do.
Right. One of the things that we review is your institutional record, and you've had some infractions throughout the years, some involving the use of some narcotics. Do you have any issues with drugs or alcohol at this point?
I don't. No, ma'am, I don't.
And you had a recent disciplinary infraction just a few months ago. So why should this board think that if we grant you parole that you're going to go out and follow the rules and the laws of society if you do not follow the rules within the institution?
Well, this last infraction, I was trusted the wrong person. This lady contacted me, and I trusted her. I thought she was going to do a documentary on mental health, and I really am not guilty of what they charged me with, and I have filed an appeal on that charge. And as far as your question, I've never been in trouble before, and the things that I have been found guilty of in here have been just stupidity. I know I made a lot of mistakes in here, and I have learned from them. And before this last infraction, it had been 10 years. Because I grew up and I knew that I needed to stop making dumb decisions. And I did. I knew it was time to grow up and do the right thing. I just made a lot of dumb choices and mistakes in here. So I know I've learned from those mistakes.
What do you feel is the most important thing that you've learned while you've been incarcerated?
Ma'am?
What do you think is the most important thing that you have learned while you have been incarcerated?
That people are important, that forgiveness and love, that family is important, and that decisions we make don't just affect us, they affect the people that we love. And not to take things or people for granted.
All right, is there anything else that you would like to tell us today that wasn't in your packet or that has not already been said?
I would just like to say that I am a Christian, and God is a big part of my life, and I know He has forgiven me, and it is by His grace and mercy and I have a lot of faith, and I live by that every day. And I just ask that you show that same kind of mercy as well. And I guess, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board? Folks at Watkins, I need each of you to please state your name for the record and your relationship to Ms. Smith. Ma'am, can we begin with you, please?
Ma'am, state your name and your relationship. Ma'am, state your name and your relationship.
I did not. Is it I?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Ann Curry. I'm a long-term friend and supporter of Susan.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. And sir, your name, please?
And
State your name, sir, and your relationship. State your name and your relationship.
okay, I'm the Reverend Tom Curry. I've known Susan briefly when she was a teenager, when I was called in for one session each, counseling about two different matters, once by her teacher and once by Susan. And I testified at her trial, in the sentencing phase, and I have kept up with her by writing her weekly for the last 30 years. I did this because I felt that she needed somebody to remind her that her whole life was not caught up in that one experience, but that she could put her life back together, because her life was in such turmoil when all this happened. And I think she's a different person now. And that's what I want to talk about when I get a chance to say a word about it. I have new hearing aids, and I can't always hear your questions, but my mind's fine, and I'm just a retired Presbyterian minister alone.
Well, thank you, Mr. Curry. We appreciate that, and you're welcome. You're welcome to make your statement that you would like to make right now.
All right. Okay, I want to start with her trial.
Mr. Curry, let me interrupt you before you get too far into that. We are not here to retry her case in any form or fashion. That is not the purpose of the parole board. We are here to determine if she is a good candidate for parole, and if so, we would set the parameters of that parole. But in no way can we discuss the trial or retry her case. She was convicted of 2 counts of murder. If you'd like to speak to anything outside of that, you're welcome to.
Okay, now, I just want to say 2 things about the trial. I only went to the trial for one morning to testify in the sentencing phase against the death penalty. And the 2 things that I picked up from the trial itself was, one, a prison guard who came, a female, who said that she had not seen a criminal as remorseful as Susan was, and that she felt her remorse for what she had done was genuine. And the second thing was, one of the jurors, the prosecuting attorney, was pushing hard for the death penalty, and the jury voted not, and they voted life, as y'all have already mentioned. But one of the jurors said that she felt like that it would be harder for Susan to live with what she had done than to die. And I thought that was a true statement. And it certainly has been for Susan during her 30 years in prison, and especially the first part of her time that she was there. It's been easy. She attempted suicide several times, and she had a couple of run-ins where guards were able to use her for their pleasure, and that's a bad situation, and was dealt with, and she was not the only prisoner involved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Curry. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments. Mrs. Curry, do you wish to say anything?
Yes, please, and thank you for letting us speak. I just want to say that I really think Susan is ready for parole now. She has surrounded herself with a caring support community that advises and encourages her, and she listens to them. As Mr. Thomas said, she has done everything she can to prepare herself to live outside of prison and taking courses and learning how to teach in caring about other people and working on teams and projects together. And thirdly, as both of them have said, she is not the young woman who went into prison 30 years ago. She is much stronger. She has grieved, is still grieving, will always grieve. But she's learned from it. And she has experienced paralyzing remorse and survived. Today, she wants to begin to rebuild her life, and I hope you'll give her that chance.
I want to say one more word. For the last 2 years, now remember, I wrote her for 30 years, once a week, pretty close to every week. And that is, the last 2 years, I've ended my letters by saying, Susan, you live in a needy place. Share God's love with those around you and with your other contacts, but always live in hope for your own future. There is a time when you will live on your own again, past prison, and that's what I hope y'all will give her the chance to do at this time. She is a very different person from what she was 30 years ago. And I've probably been in contact with her, talking about spiritual things, but also just trying to enlarge her life by telling her about what's going on in the world around her and in the Curry family. She's the same age as one of my children.
All right, thank you, Mr. Curry. We appreciate all of your comments, sir. We appreciate all of your comments and all of the information. Mr. Thomas, anything in closing, sir?
No, ma'am. Nothing further than I really would ask the board to take the time to consider Susan's request for parole. I do believe that if we look at insight into things that we've done and as far as things that we need to do to get out of the Department of Corrections and to try to make our life worthwhile or mean something, I think Susan is at that point. And I just again want to thank you for listening today, and hope you would consider our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Ms. Smith, and thank you,
Yes,
Mr. and
ma'am.
Mrs. Curry. We certainly appreciate all of you joining us today. If you all will please exit the rooms, we will have an answer for you later today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
One moment, as
There we have it. Susan Smith's friends, John and Ann Curry, pleading to the board for her release. We heard from Susan herself, breaking down, crying at one point, saying that I know what I did was horrible. Now, we're about to hear the opposition to her release. Next up, we're going to hear from family members, people who loved Michael and Alex dearly, namely their father. Susan's ex-husband, David Smith, is there. Also there, the prosecutor who put Susan Smith behind bars, attorney Tommy Pope. He's up first to speak to the board. Back after this. Order. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. We are live in Columbia, South Carolina, covering the parole board hearing for convicted killer Susan Smith. We heard from her attorney, who said that today is all about Susan. But now it's time to put the focus on the victims and give victims Michael and Alex Smith a voice. There to do that inside of the building behind me are 12 people, including the children's father, David Smith, and including the prosecutor who went after Susan Smith, attorney Tommy Pope. He's first up, delivering an impact statement.
Good afternoon. You all are here for the parole consideration case of Susan Smith. Is that correct?
Yes.
We are so very, very sorry for the circumstances that brought you all to be a part of this hearing today. But we cannot tell you how much we appreciate you joining us and being here with us today. Thank you so much. Before we begin, I do need each of you to please state your name for the record and your interest in this case. Sir, can we begin with you, please?
Stand up.
You don't have to stand up. You do whatever's comfortable for you.
I'm David Smith. I'm the father of Michael and Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I'm Tiffany Smith. I am David Smith's wife.
I'm Rebecca Smith French. I'm the aunt of Michael and Alex.
I'm Savannah Smith, and I am David's daughter, Michael and Alex's sister.
Austin Hughes. I'm a friend of the victim family.
I'm Tommy Pope. I was the solicitor in the original trial.
I'm Kevin Brackett. I'm the 16th Circuit solicitor currently and was a prosecutor on the original case.
Laura Hudson was the Crime Victims Counsel.
Mark Reynolds. I'm with the victim's family.
Billy Bailey, personal friend.
Kathy Bailey, personal friend.
Jeff Bailey, Sheriff, Union County.
Scott Cooper, Sheriff's Office, Union County.
Michael Cogdill, documentarian.
Rita Swan, aunt to Michael and Alex.
Doug Smith, Dave's uncle.
Thank you all, and again, we are so very, very sorry for the circumstances, but thank you for being here with us today. We do have the facts of the offense, and we've heard from Ms. Smith. Now we want to hear from you all, whether you were for or against parole, and if anyone would like to make a statement, you are certainly welcome to do so. Mr. Smith, would you like to begin, or would you like to conclude at the end? It's completely up to you.
Conclude at the end, please.
Okay. Who would like to speak first?
I'll speak first, please, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So I'm Tommy Pope. I was the 16th Circuit solicitor, and this was a death penalty case. And the reason it was a death penalty case, you know, the solicitor has that discretion, but the reason it was a death penalty case, you know the facts and circumstances, and I just felt strongly that had the black man with the toboggan committed the crime, people would expect a death penalty. If David Smith had committed the crime, people would expected the death penalty. And I thought it was very important that the betrayal that Susan Smith showed, that she be treated the same. We knew it was going to be difficult. We knew there was a likelihood of not achieving the death penalty. But I think it's important to note the jury at the time actually asked, what did life mean? And you may be aware, but in that time, life did not mean life. Life became life in 96. We tried the case in 95. So the jury was asked, and the judge was required to instruct the jury that you take life and death in its plain and usual meaning. Carrying that forward, the jury showed her mercy. The jury gave her a life sentence. But one of the jurors, or more of the jurors, after the fact, and speaking to the media, said that they believed the life sentence was the greater punishment because they believed that Susan should have to reflect on what she did to Michael and Alex, that she should have to spend the rest of her life thinking about what she'd done. The two fallacies in that logic that the jury could not have known are, number one, obviously we're here today, so life did not mean life. Number two, and you have it before you, Susan's conduct from the day she rolled the kids in the lake. The defense claimed a botched suicide, but she was able to save herself. She was able to blame a black guy. She wasn't wet. She wasn't injured when she runs to the house and concocts this story. Susan has always focused on Susan. I will believe to the end of my time that Susan made a horrible, horrible choice to choose a man over her family. I said the boys were in the car, her wedding gown was in the car, her wedding album was in the car. She thought in a nice package she could roll that away. If she could have put David in the car, he would have been there too. In a nice package, she could roll that away and start this new life with this other man. And she led everyone on, including David, for 9 horrible days. And so as you look at her conduct in prison, whether it was a relationship with guards, the social media, the attention, the conduct recently with the publisher, Susan, you know, she's got people outside, I'm sure you've heard from them, that want to take care of her. Susan has always focused on what's best for Susan. And so the evidence that you have before you, I think, tells clearly that she has not focused on Michael and Alex. She only has and continues to focus on herself. And so on behalf of this family, on behalf of justice and the justice for this case, it's not about her behavior or what she would do when getting out, but I know one of your criteria is the nature of the crime and whether the punishment is there. And I would submit for the crime she committed, the action she committed, that punishment has not been achieved yet. And so I would ask you to deny parole. Now, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Short and sweet message from attorney Tommy Pope. Wow, what a moment we just witnessed. Did you see those 12 people, 12 of them there to advocate for Susan Smith's continued incarceration, including Michael and Alex's father, David Smith, his new wife, Tiffany, his daughter, who would be the half-sister of Michael and Alex. All of these friends, family members of law enforcement, members of the solicitor's office there to advocate to keep this child killer behind bars. Our live coverage continues in just a moment. Stay right here with Court TV Live.
Coming soon to Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
He is the boogeyman.
Lori Daybell.
She said, I will have you destroyed.
She's got another murder trial coming up.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
We will not stop fighting. We have no quit.
Sean Diddy Combs arrested on a federal indictment.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon, only on Court TV.
We are watching history unfold right now in Columbia, South Carolina. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. Susan Smith up for parole. We're hearing from the opposition right now. We just heard from the solicitor who put her behind bars, attorney Tommy Pope, and now one of his colleagues, Mr. Kevin Brackett, someone who worked with him on the Smith case 30 years ago, is addressing the board.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chairman, Chair Lady, and members of the board, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. I was on the prosecution team that handled the prosecution along with Solicitor Pope and Speaker Pope now, who you just heard from. I wanted to bring to you a couple of vignettes from the case to help bring this alive for you. In the course of preparing for today, I've gone back over the case. I've reviewed the file. I've pulled some of the evidence out, which is in a closet just off my office. Evidence like the note that was written to Susan Smith by her boyfriend, the man she was cheating on her husband with, who told her in the note that he could not be with her anymore because he didn't want children, and that they had no long-term future because he didn't want children. And then 1 week later, she's rolling her car down the ramp at John D. Long Lake with her 2 children strapped into the back. She betrayed her husband when she cheated on him, and she betrayed her children against the laws of nature when she should have been sworn to protect those children. She betrayed them when she left them in the seat and rolled that car down, and she was not trying to commit suicide. She was trying to change her life. She wanted to kill her old life and start anew. She was wearing a sweatshirt that the man who she was cheating with had given to her when she was on TV 2 hours later after claiming that a black man in a toboggan had carjacked her and spirited her 2 children away. How many black men in red Mazdas got pulled over across the country because they were looking for those 2 kids and they were looking for this fictitious man that didn't exist, purely a figment of her imagination? I was on the banks of John D. Long Lake, standing there with about 40 or 45 people, 50 people, as the tow truck from Greer's Wrecker launched its line into the water where divers hooked it up to the car and pulled it out. Total silence as that car emerged from the dark water. Everybody sitting there hoping and praying that maybe it was a different car. Maybe it was a wrong car. Maybe the kids weren't in there. Not a word was said. It was one of the most haunting memories of my life, and it will live with me forever. And that's the last point I want to make. You're going to hear from this man, and he's going to tell you what this did to him. I can't begin to describe it. I sat in court and listened to him testify, and it was heart-wrenching as he described that his hopes and dreams for the future were destroyed that night when she killed their 2 children. This didn't just traumatize him. It traumatized Union. It traumatized South Carolina. The entire country was in the grips of her lie and her treachery. The entire country. This was a global sensation. People were fixated on this. They're not the only victims. And on behalf of the community that I represent now, I don't believe she should ever be released from jail until the last person alive who remembers Michael and Alex is dead. And that will not be in her lifetime. She should never be released, and she should not be released now. His hopes and dreams were dashed. I hope you dash hers today and every 2 years hereafter.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else wish to speak? You're welcome to stay seated if you're more comfortable, whatever's best for you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to read what I wrote. Okay, it's easier, if you don't mind. When Susan murdered Michael and Alex, she altered the course of my life and my family's life forever. Having grown up with 3 older brothers, Susan was like the sister I never had. I was a teenage mom of just 16, so I looked up to her and even admired her. I thought she was the best mother to the boys, and I strived to be just like her. I would even leave my own daughter with her while I attended night school. Susan betrayed us and took the lives of those boys and then lied about it. For days, when she did this, she destroyed a trust in me that I've never regained. And as a result, I do not develop close relationships with others easily, in particular females. Anxiety and depression have plagued my life for years. I push it away during spring and summer as best possible, but it always creeps back up around Alex's birthday when it rolls around in August, because I know Michael's won't be far behind in October. And then the anniversary of their death on the 25th. Because in my mind,
What a beautiful showing of support this is from Michael and Alex, the victims. In this case, Susan Smith is not the victim. Will she be paroled? When we come back, we'll hear the plea from her ex-husband, David Smith, to keep her behind bars.
I know that what I did was horrible. And I would give anything if I could go back and change it. And I love Michael and Alex with all my heart.
Breaking news here in Columbia, South Carolina, as the parole board has just denied Susan Smith parole. She'll stay behind bars for the murders of her 2 beautiful young sons, Michael and Alex. 12 people went before the board to advocate for her staying behind bars. The last person to address the board was the boy's father, David Smith. Let's watch.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee. It's been a tough 30 years. I'm not here to speak about what she's done in prison. You all have the records and accounts of all that. I'm just here to advocate on Michael and Alex's behalf and as their father. You know, God gives us free choice. And she made free choice that night to end her life. This wasn't a tragic mistake. It wasn't something that she didn't mean to do. She purposely meant to end her life. I never have felt any remorse from her for it. She's never expressed any to me. I never seen it on paper. No, you've heard, she changed my life for the rest of my life that night. for the better, some for the worse, but what she did, not only to Michael and Alex, she came pretty close to causing me to end my life because of the grief that she brought upon me. But thankfully she didn't. I understand back in 95 that through the state's law, life in prison meant 30 years to life. And now that's different, but at that time, that's what counts. I understand that. But ultimately, to me, that's only 15 years per child. Her own children. It's just not enough. So I'm asking that you please deny her parole today. And hopefully in the future, but specifically today. Not let her out. I miss them very much. And I love them very much. And I will be here every 2 years going forward to ensure that their death doesn't go in vain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Smith. Again, please know how very, very sorry this board is to all of you for all the pain that this crime caused you. But we sincerely appreciate you all being here with us today. Thank you very much. And thank you for the reminder with the picture of Alex and Michael. They were beautiful children. So thank you for reminding us of that today. We wish you the very best. And if no one else has anything else that they would like to say, if you all will exit with these ladies over here, we'll have an answer for you shortly. Thank you so much for being here. As a reminder, Mrs. Mary did recuse herself. Ms. Susan Smith is denied parole. The vote is unanimous. Numbers 1 and 6. Thank you.
Thank you. The time now is 12:51 p.m. We will pause our recording. Ms. Hunter, if you can advise when the recording has been paused.
The recording has been paused.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is Valerie Suber, Associate Deputy Director for Paroles, Pardons, and Relief Services. If everyone would just give me a moment to give some instructions as the room.
And now we've witnessed history. A unanimous decision from the South Carolina Parole Board to deny child killer Susan Smith release. 30 years since she was locked up for murdering her beautiful young sons, Michael and Alex. 30 years their father, David, has lived on this earth without them. And what beautiful advocacy he put forth for them here and now today. We're continuing our coverage of this historic day in South Carolina as we've just learned that David Smith is going to be speaking to members of the media. Behind me is the building where this hearing just took place. And you can see on the ground numerous members of law enforcement. Security is very high, as media interest is very high. And David Smith has indicated he's going to be making a statement to the media, not taking questions from the general media, but just making a statement any minute now. We also are hoping to get David Smith here with us in our mobile court TV studio to talk with him one-on-one. And we're also hoping to get attorney Tommy Pope here with us now. Now, Speaker Pope, as he is a state lawmaker here in South Carolina after having a tremendous career as a prosecuting attorney. Justice was served for Michael and Alex. If they were alive today, Michael would be 33 years old and Alex would be 31. You have to wonder, where would they be? What would they be doing if their mother hadn't ended their lives? I want to get some reaction now from my friend and colleague, Julia Janae, Court TV anchor, standing by at our studio headquarters, watching along. Julia, curious, what stood out the most to you as you were taking in this hearing? Was there any moment that you really felt was a pivotal moment?
Well, Julie, I'm still just in awe of this process. The way we saw those 12 people inside of that room with the people who were making that decision, I think that just seemed to speak volumes. That even if there was anything in one of those board members' minds that 30 years is a long time and maybe she had served enough time, that brought it home that this is still an ongoing point of pain. The damage that she caused continues to permeate. And just hearing David Smith talk about how he hasn't gotten that apology, that remorse from his ex-wife, that it became a situation where he would have taken his life because of the pain that she caused and the grief. And that just brings home what this was like for this family, for this father, for this community. And I think so much we heard from even the former prosecutors, it's just a reminder of who she is, because hearing her speak, you could perhaps wonder, okay, she was 23 at the time. Was she dealing with a lot? Is this something where she has changed? And even if she was able to convince them with the waterworks that we saw from her during her chance to speak, I think just hearing about the damage that she caused from David himself and even those other family members, I think that reminded people that even 30 years, there's still more work behind bars that she needs to do to pay for these crimes.
Right, Julia, isn't that the truth? I mean, the pain that she's caused so many people. And you know this well, Julia, you have a homicide case like this where 2 lives were taken in such a cruel, painful way. And they aren't the only victims, as we know. To your point, David Smith, the relatives he brought with him here today, his uncle, the children's great uncle, his new wife, Tiffany, they have built a beautiful family together and are working through the pain day in and day out. And the children's half-sister is there supporting them. I mean, so many people's lives have been changed forever because of what Susan Smith did back on October 25th, 1994. And Julia, how about that little fact that prosecutor Kevin Brackett let out, the attorney who worked with Tommy Pope in trying this case, how he said, when we saw Susan Smith pleading to the public, lying to the public, betraying her husband, his trust, the trust of law enforcement, everybody, when she's making up this story, she's wearing a sweatshirt given to her by the man she was having an affair with. And to kill her kids in the pursuit of a man is one of the most sickening things you could ever think about when it comes to a parent. That fact was a fact I had never heard before, Julia. Had you? I had never heard that fact about her having her lover's sweatshirt on as she's pleading alongside her husband to all the cameras.
I had not heard that nugget. I think there were many nuggets that just this coverage of the parole hearing is bringing back up. And I heard in your interview earlier today with a former Court TV correspondent, Beth Karras, that there weren't cameras in the courtroom for this case, that they tried to get cameras in. It was during the time of the O.J. Simpson trial. But I think what infuriated people about this case, beyond the infuriating part of a mother killing her children, was that she got on national TV and lied about it. And you heard the former prosecutor talking about that how many black men were pulled over in red Mazdas because she claimed that's who carjacked me, that's who stole my kids. And people wanted to know, who knows how much the community was impacted from going after who they thought could be the suspect, that she was there on TV saying this is who did it. And even hearing this nugget, Julie, from Tommy Pope, when he mentioned that in that car was also her wedding dress and her wedding album. I had forgotten that she was trying to push away her whole life. And then he so vividly pointed out that she would have liked for David to be in that vehicle as well. I think that just really drew out an important part of this, because we heard Tommy Thomas, the defense attorney for Susan Smith, saying this was not about another man, that this was something that stuck, something that came out early on, but that prosecutors had walked away from it, but that it wasn't really part of the case. But I think the way that the victims portion of this parole board segment, this hearing, I think that really solidified that, yes, this still, even if it didn't come out all the way in the trial, and maybe perhaps it was difficult to prove, I'm not sure, I didn't watch the entire trial, but I heard Tommy Thomas say that, but certainly it seemed to be clarified that this was all about her wanting another life.
Right, Julia, you're exactly right. Those 12 people together helped to refute the defense team's contention that this wasn't about the affair, that it was about untreated mental health. There is so much more to say about this historic day in South Carolina, where child killer Susan Smith has been denied parole. We're going to stand by and wait for the statements from David Smith to the public after he's learned this big news. And justice has been served for his children, Michael and Alex. We'll be right back.
Case of Susan Smith.
This woman is up for parole.
I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you stay behind bars.
The Susan Smith parole hearing. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, a South Carolina mother convicted in the deaths of her 2 young sons appears before a parole board. We'll bring you the takeaways from today's big hearing.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. Thank you for following along with us as we follow breaking news out of South Carolina, where convicted killer of her 2 sons, Susan Smith, has been denied parole by the parole board. The decision was unanimous, and we have been bringing you live coverage from there in Columbia, South Carolina. And right now we're waiting for reaction from the victims' family members, those 12 people that we saw there supporting the denial of parole for Susan Smith. We are waiting to see if they are going to be speaking to the public, and we also are understanding that David Smith, the father of those 2 little boys who gave that poignant message to the parole board inside just moments ago, where he told them that she had ruined his life at that time, even to the point that he wanted to take his own life because of the grief that she had caused. He is joining our own Julie Grant right now on the ground there, so we will go there in just a moment. But first, we want to listen back to a moment, David Smith's wife speaking to the parole board. Let's go back in.
As David's wife, I have stood by him for the last 30 years and watched his pain, his suffering, his dark days that you cannot imagine. It's been hard as a loving wife to stand back and watch him suffer the pain that he has gone through. To not want to get out of bed some days. To not be able to get out of bed. Because the pain was so much for him. And for 30 years, we had thought this day would never come. But yet here we are. I don't feel that it's time for her to be let out, because she took 2 lives. She didn't just take 1. She took 2 precious little boys that we haven't been able to watch grow up. And as Becky stated earlier, all the things that we've missed out on because of them not being here, all the things they missed out on, growing up in and doing. And for her to be in prison for the last 30 years, you would think that she would have thought about what she's done. She would have said, I'm sorry. But she hasn't said, I'm sorry. She hasn't even called him. She hasn't even told him she was sorry. Much less the world. For 9 days, all I can think about is how much she lied and manipulated everybody, the whole world. I watched it and believed her myself. I wanted her to be telling the truth. But to be betrayed by her lies. And that just makes me feel like if she could do that then, whatever she's told you today, I'm sure were probably lies as well. Because she has shown in her last 30 years what she does in prison. She's all about herself. It's all about what she can do to make her life better. And Michael and Alex didn't get a chance at life. They were forced the death penalty. She took that from them. The lives of this family has been forever changed. It caused us to be a little overprotective of our now daughter. A little bit more than we probably should have been. Because we were afraid something might happen to her. It's changed the way we look at life. It's changed the way that we look at everybody. Who can I trust? For a long time, I didn't trust a lot of people. I had to be careful, around certain people. I didn't know if I could trust them or not. All because of her lies. So to give this family some peace, it would be best if Susan stayed behind bars and stay in prison for the rest of her life. I respectfully ask you to keep her in. Thank you.
And the response unanimously from that board was to keep Susan Smith behind bars. You heard there from David Smith's wife, Tiffany, and we're going to hear from David Smith now. He is joining our Julie Grant out there on the ground. We're going to squeeze in a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll hear more about what this decision today means for their family.
We continue our breaking news coverage as history is being made here in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm Julie Grant, and this is Court TV Live. Convicted killer Susan Smith has been denied parole. She will stay behind bars for the murders of her two beautiful young sons, Michael and Alex. And what a showing of support it was for Michael and Alex. The advocacy, the opposition to her release was so powerful. You could feel it no matter where you were watching it. And the best advocate for Michael and Alex is their dad, David Smith. And I'm so honored to have him joining me now in our Court TV studio. David, how are you feeling?
Much relieved. A lot of the stress is now gone. It's been building up for at least 6 months, and it was getting unbearable. But now it's all going away, at least for another 2 years.
Right, right. As you said, in 2 years, she will be able to go before this board again and ask for release again. Tell me, did you think the board would unanimously vote to keep her locked up?
I didn't know what to think. I mean, this being my first time, and there even being a possibility that she could get out, I really didn't know what to think. I know what I was hoping, which is what we got, but I didn't know what to think.
Sure. I want to talk to you about Michael and Alex. I noticed as soon as I saw you walk in, I noticed your button up close, and it gave me chills just seeing their beautiful faces. Where did this idea come from to wear them on your suit today?
Because we wore them at the trial, which was the other biggest event, you know, pertaining to Susan Smith up to this point. So we wanted to wear this and just put as much remembrance of Michael and Alex out there in front of everybody.
Is this the same button you wore at the trial?
No, it's not the same.
A different one? Okay,
No,
I wondered.
I keep the original one locked up.
Yeah, it's sacred. Yeah, absolutely. David, when I think about where your beautiful boys would be, the possibilities are endless, right? Today, if Michael and Alex were alive, Michael would be 33 years old. Alex would be 31. Do you ever wonder where they would be, what kind of men they would be, what kind of lives they'd be living?
Sometimes I do try to think far ahead, but Julie always just come back to 3 and 14 months old. That's what there will always be in my head.
Sure, sure. And I think for everybody, not just across America, but around the world, who's fallen in love with your boys and who's wanted so much to see justice for them. David, do you feel the love? Do you feel the public support for you and your family?
I have felt it today, for sure. All that, all the outpouring and all the letters I was told to have just flooded in the last few months. I feel the love today, absolutely.
Tell me about the pain. Does the pain ever really subside?
No, absolutely not. It gets easier. But then some days, some weeks, it rears its ugly head again, and it's really difficult to put, you know, one foot in front of the other. But then it subsides again, and it may rest that way for X amount of time, but it never goes away, and it's never just low key. It does have spikes in it, ups and downs.
Sure. Peaks and valleys,
Yes.
huh? Peaks and valleys. What gets you through the valleys, the really low, low points?
First and foremost, my faith in God, and then family and friends, and third, probably music. I love 80s music, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Who doesn't, right?
Right.
No, that's great. You know, your family, your friends, what a beautiful family you have now. Your wife, Tiffany, in the courtroom today, or in the parole board room. I'm used to saying courtroom, but she, you know, has been there, a tremendous advocate by your side. Your beautiful daughter, Savannah, I had the pleasure of meeting her in the room in front of the board today. Tell me a little bit about your family today. You know, I know Savannah wanted the board to know that she's Michael and Alex's sister. She made a point. That was how she wanted to be introduced. What's their support of you and the boys like?
What do you mean, like how?
You know, how do you remember the boys, I guess, in your family now? Because it seems like so long ago, right, that, you know, this horrific incident happened and you had to start all over, start rebuilding your life again. And thank goodness you have a beautiful second wife, beautiful 2 children, a son and a daughter. And how are Michael and Alex still a part of your family, even though they aren't physically present here, is what I'm asking.
I guess it's their presence is always there. I guess I unfortunately have to word it as their notoriety is always there, but we still talk to them a lot. I know I do, and I know Savannah does. Tiffany does too, but I know Savannah and myself talk to them quite often, so we lean on them a lot for support and guidance.
That's such a beautiful thing.
I mean, it's like I said one time, it's ironic that Michael and Alex seem to have taught me more in death than I ever had a chance to teach them while they were alive.
Wow, David. Oh my gosh, that gives me chills. You feel them guiding you and teaching you.
Yep, they're giving me wisdom.
What a beautiful thing. And I know you're such a man of faith. Does it give you hope believing that you'll be reunited with them again in heaven someday when God calls you home?
It gives me great hope. That's what makes my heart smile when I think of that.
Oh my gosh. David, your boys will never, ever be forgotten. And today in this hearing, we heard Susan's attorney talking about how today was about her. And I know there's a lot of people who disagree with that and believe today was about Michael and Alex. Tell me, today, the way they ran the hearing, it wasn't like you were able to have any conversation with Susan. You know, it was done separately, where we heard from her separately and then you all were brought in together to oppose the release. If you had an opportunity to say something to her today, what would you have said?
Not much, because I really don't think she cares. But if I did have the opportunity to say one thing to her, I would ask her, does she have any idea of how much damage she's done to immediate, extended family and beyond? Not just to, me or my kids now, just aunts, uncles, cousins. Does she have any idea the damage that she's done?
What do you think she would say to that question?
The way I feel now, I would think she wouldn't care. She doesn't seem to care about anything but her and what's happening to her. She has stayed that course. I give her that since she was arrested and been incarcerated. It's always been about what it's done to her or what it's doing to her.
David, you feel like the Susan Smith you've seen over these last 30 years is not the Susan Smith that you thought you knew when you married her?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've been asked were there any signs in our marriage that made me even hint that she would have done what she did, and there wasn't. There honestly wasn't. So she was a great mother up until the moment she killed him. So that is two entirely different people that I know. From my viewpoint, in my mind's eye, it's two entirely different people.
And that makes this crime even more stunning, doesn't it? That it seemed to come out of nowhere.
Absolutely, because I believed her the whole 9 days, 100%. She was such a good mother up until that moment. There was no signs of any severe depression or, PTS or postpartum depression, none of that.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden being told that she's the one who killed Michael and Alex, it's heckle and jive.
Wow. David, do you think anyone can really know who the real Susan Smith is?
Do I think anyone can know?
Yeah. No. Yeah.
I don't think you can trust anything she said. I don't know what she told the parole board today, but I urge them, to listen carefully, because it was probably just lies or a wash over to get sympathy.
Mm-hmm. She told them that she feels horrible about what she did. She told them that she loved Michael and Alex with all her heart. And they asked her a lot of questions, whether she learned from her bad behavior in prison. She said she had, and her attorney did a lot of the talking, and he said that this was largely untreated mental illness that was the problem, and that if given the opportunity, her new life goal is to try to help other people. What do you think of that?
That's honorable. That's very honorable of her to want to help other people. But she needs the help from behind bars. All her good intentions now, as honorable as they may be, does not still change the fact what she did. So if she truly wants to help people, then she'll prove it by helping them behind bars.
That's right. David, tell me, what does the healing process look like for you as you continue to move forward? You know, because events like today bring back a lot of trauma, don't they? Yes. What does healing look like? You know, when you leave here today and go home with your family, what does that look like moving forward?
It takes a lot out of me, more these days it seems, doing interviews and attending this hearing, but you know, interviews such as this one itself is a double-edged sword. That's the way I perceive it, because on one hand, yes, it's hard to talk about these things. It really is. But on the other side, it gives me a platform, a chance to stand up for Michael and Alex. So that's part of the healing.
Well, we certainly appreciate you being so generous with your time.
You're very welcome.
We wish you all the best, David.
Thank you.
Justice has been served today for your beautiful boys, Michael and Alex.
Yes, it has.
Every good wish, and I hope we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you kindly. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more coverage of today's hearing where Susan Smith has been denied parole.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
He is the boogeyman.
Lori Daybell.
She said, I will have you destroyed.
She's got another murder trial coming up.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
Tonight, on closing arguments, a South Carolina mother convicted in the deaths of her 2 young sons appears before a parole board. We'll bring you the takeaways from today's big hearing.
Closing arguments tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
We continue our breaking news coverage live from Columbia, South Carolina. I'm Julie Grant. Thank you for watching Court TV Live. We were just talking with David Smith, the ex-husband of Susan Smith and the father of little Michael and Alex. Today, justice was served for those 2 beautiful boys as their mother, who took their lives, has been denied parole. I have another very special guest joining me now, the attorney who famously put away Susan Smith and was advocating today for her to stay behind bars. He is the Speaker of the House now in South Carolina. Speaker Pro Tem, Tommy Pope, yes, also one of our favorite legal analysts. We are just so in awe of you. You've had such an illustrious career.
It's been a long, strange trip.
No, it has. It has. Well, you've done so many things. And looking back, 30 years ago, you were the youngest solicitor in the state, taking on this case. The nation was talking about it. Does it feel like it's been 30 years?
You know, I always tell people, we probably said it a lot in life, you know, it's been just yesterday and 100 years at the same time. But, you know, it was a difficult time. You saw just a small taste. I know you saw the Murdoch case and the media coverage, and you saw what occurred here today. But you also saw David Smith. And you saw, you know, I've told you before, he was my rock. When we tried the case and when the theme went from Susan the monster to Susan the victim, David was solid. And it just, the man you see today, if anything, he's stronger and has more faith. And it was an honor. You know, you've been a prosecutor. You know, you're trying to be, you know, one of the good guys and fight for the victims. And it was a humbling, honorable experience to stand with him both then and today.
I can't think of anybody better than you to have handled that case, Tommy.
Thank you.
And you have connected with David, you know, through this case in a way that you two have maintained a friendship all these years, haven't you?
Yeah, you know, I tell you, and of course, obviously, as this time has drawn nigh, we've started speaking again. I always represent a horrible time in victims' lives. So, you know, all of my victims, I always like to hear. You know, it was nice to meet his daughter now, and you know, I'd met Tiffany before. I think when he appeared with you before, and we did the joint thing, and I teased that my eyes were sweating. I wasn't really crying, you know, because I just,
we all were.
You know, it's like going. I said it's like being in a foxhole together or a military experience. You know, you bond, and it's a bittersweet thing. I mean, we spent about 3 hours waiting today, you know, on the hearing together, and it's tough, but. You know, I think words transcend. You know, we'll be always bonded together, and the Lord willing, every 2 years that He needs me, I'll be right here with Him again.
Oh, Tommy, that's awesome. You're the best. Tell me, did you plan in advance to be the one to go first? Because I couldn't have thought of anyone better than you to start things off. That was so strong.
No, actually, I think we all cut a flip because we thought David would lead off, and you know, I would myself and Solicitor Brackett would kind of bat clean up, and so then. You know, I've told you before, you know, talking to me is like getting a sip of water out of a fire hydrant. You normally have people in my ear telling me to, you know, to cut. And so I was worried that I was giving too much information. And then after I, you know, was back and they started touching, I then wanted to say, I remember when Susan laughed in the courtroom when the jury was out, when we were watching the video of the car sinking, but cried when the jury was present. And we didn't get to see Susan's testimony. I think you guys did get to see it.
Right.
And my daughter actually got to see it. She was sitting outside, and she pointed out that Susan wasn't crying till the lights came on, so to speak. And so that was consistent with what we saw in the courtroom. You know, as you know, you can't tell the jury she's crying now, but she wasn't when you were back in the room. So I think she today, her presentation even, again, which I have not seen, from what I've been told, is the same Susan that we knew in the courtroom.
Tommy, you're exactly right. That's how it went down, because when her attorney was speaking, he was going through a lot of painful things in her life, her background. No doubt she has had a lot of trauma in her background before she killed Michael and Alex. And when her attorney was going through all that, we could see the split screen, and she was completely composed. And then, as you said, when the lights came on, when it was time for her to speak, it was waterworks.
Yeah.
And that's what you experienced 30 years ago.
Absolutely, and then that's it. You ache because you've got to try the case in the courtroom, but you know what you want to do to the jury or the world. You know, I told you at the time that the state hospital doctors said Susan was competent to stand trial, but she was so suicidal she couldn't possibly testify because she'd asked for the death penalty. That was orchestrated, not even for the jury, but for the public at large to think, poor Susan. And I think the good thing today, the way it played out, and the opportunity for all of you to see Susan, you see it's not just, you know, David seeking vengeance or you know, it's about justice. And every once in a while, you know, you cover a lot of cases, every once in a while you get a real peek at who the defendant is. And I think people got to see that today.
I think you're exactly right. And her attorney made a point to say today is about Susan. And I'm sure you would strongly disagree with that statement, Tommy.
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, in Susan's mind, and again, I'm not making light of suicide, I'm not making light of mental health, but whatever's wired Susan together, every day is about Susan. And this needed to be a day for Michael and Alex. You've seen, I mean, David Smith, his family, they're carrying that torch as strongly and as capably as any victim's family that I've dealt with. And, you know, unfortunately, I think the nature of the case is probably burned into them to, you know, this will be the rest of their life. And to the extent I can, this will be the rest of mine.
Right, Tommy. Tell me, were you confident that the board would deny her parole?
You know, statistically, it's funny how you know, people buy lottery tickets because they think maybe they'll win. You know, well, you know, I knew the death penalty was going to be extremely difficult, but it didn't keep us from going forward. Likewise, I felt like that looking at that group of people and knowing that what was being said resonated with them, knowing Susan's conduct, knowing even the statistics of most people not getting parole, I felt good about it. But, you know, I've told you, I've looked jurors in the eye and they nod during my closing argument and then say not guilty. So
until you get, quote, the verdict, or, you know, the decision in this case, which, in fairness, came fairly soon after we left the room, it was a relief, because I'll tell you, even though you felt you knew what was going to happen in that room, if you can imagine, I mean, you've prepared witnesses, you've done closing statements, you know the tension's there. It's almost a relief, and for the family, of course, doubly so, because you get to kind of pour out that emotion, and then you get back in the room, and you quickly after hear that she's been denied, and it's, you want to laugh and you want to cry and you want to hug each other, and then, you know, you can't help it. The first thing in your mind, we're going to do it again in 2 years.
Right. That's got to be a tough feeling, too, because it's relief, but also the lingering idea that, oh, this isn't necessarily final, huh?
Yeah, and I think for them, though, if you look at it, what would be more torture? To just know you've kind of box this together and deal with it in increments of 2 years, or think if Susan's out, because I guarantee you, if Susan's out, somehow social media, you know, she's glamorized somehow, she's profiting from it, and that would have to be the ultimate torture for all of us, but David and his family particularly.
Right. Tommy Pope, you are sensational. Thank you for this interview today. Your tremendous advocacy today, I know, meant the world to the Smith family. Thank you so much. We'll see you on Court TV very soon again for some legal analysis on other cases.